What happens when a late-night host's patience runs out and a royal guest's ego spirals completely out of control? In just 39 seconds, one comment would turn a friendly interview into the most shocking meltdown in talk show history. The studio lights were hot that night. Seth Meyer sat behind his desk with that familiar relaxed smile, ready to welcome his guest. Prince Harry walked out to thunderous applause, waving to the crowd like he owned the place. The audience loved him. They always did. He took his seat, adjusted his jacket, and that's when things started to go wrong. Seth opened with a simple question. "So, you've been in America for a while now. How are you finding life here?" Harry leaned back in his chair, a smirk playing at the corner of his mouth. "Well, Seth, I have to say, yeah, your country has a lot to learn about proper hospitality. Where I come from, we actually know how to treat people with respect." The audience went quiet. You could feel the temperature in the room shift. Seth's smile stayed frozen on his face, but his eyes showed something else. Confusion, maybe. He tried to laugh it off. That's an interesting way to start," Seth said, keeping his tone light. "I thought Americans were pretty friendly." "Friendly?" Harry interrupted, his voice dripping with condescension. "Is that what you call it? I've met kindergarten teachers with more sophistication than most people I've encountered here." Seth shifted in his seat. The crew behind the cameras exchanged glances. This wasn't going according to plan. The producers were probably scrambling in the control room. "I'm trying to figure out what to do." "Well, I'm sorry you feel that way," Seth said, his professionalism still intact. "But I think a lot of Americans would disagree with you there." Harry waved his hand dismissively, like he was swatting away a fly. "Of course they would. They don't know any better. That's the problem, isn't it? You're all so trapped in your little bubble that you can't see how the rest of the world actually functions." The audience was dead silent now. A few people shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Seth's smile had completely vanished. He placed his hands flat on the desk, his jaw tight. "You know what, Harry? I invited you here tonight because I thought we could have a nice conversation. But if you're just going to insult an entire country, maybe we should talk about something else." "Insult?" Harry laughed. A harsh sound that echoed through the studio. "I'm simply telling the truth. If Americans can't handle honesty, that says more about them than it does about me." Seth took a breath. You could see him counting to 10 in his head, trying to maintain control. "Okay, let's move on. You've written a book. Let's talk about that." "Finally, something worthy of discussion," Harry said, crossing his legs. "Yes, my book. A piece of literature that actually has substance, unlike most of the drivel published in this country." "Right," Seth said slowly. "And in this book, you talk a lot about your family." "I expose the truth about my family," Harry corrected him, holding up one finger like a professor lecturing a student. "Something journalists like you should appreciate. Though I doubt you have the courage to do real reporting." Seth's eyebrows shot up. "Excuse me?" "You heard me," Harry said, leaning forward now, his voice getting sharper. "You sit here every night making little jokes, reading from a teleprompter, and you call that journalism? Please. I've seen more hard-hitting questions from a child's tea party." The crew gasped. Someone in the audience said, "Oh my God," loud enough for the microphones to pick it up. Seth's face had gone from confused to genuinely angry. His hands gripped the edge of his desk. "Harry, I don't know what you think you're doing right now, but this is completely unacceptable," Seth said, his voice steady but firm. "I'm trying to give you a platform to talk about your work, and you're using it to attack me and everyone in this room." "Attack you?" Harry scoffed. "Seth, if I was attacking you, you'd know it. This is called honesty. This is called not coddling someone just because they have a talk show. Maybe if more people challenged you, you'd actually improve at your job." Seth stood up. The whole audience gasped. In all his years of hosting, he'd never stood up in the middle of an interview like this. His face was red, his fists clenched at his sides. "You need to stop talking right now," Seth said, his voice low and controlled. "I've been nothing but respectful to you since you walked out here. I've treated you like a guest. But you've done nothing but disrespect me, my show, my audience, and my country." Harry stood up too, matching Seth's energy. "Oh, here we go. The American victim complex. Can't take a little criticism without falling apart, can you?" "This isn't criticism," Seth shot back. "This is you being incredibly rude for no reason. What is your problem? Why did you even agree to come on this show if you were just going to act like this?" "Because I thought you might actually ask me real questions," Harry said, his voice rising. "I thought you might have the intelligence to engage in meaningful conversation. But clearly, I was wrong. You're just another puppet reading lines." Seth pointed toward the exit. "Get out." The audience went wild. Some people cheered, some gasped, some just sat there in shock. Harry's face went pale, then red, then pale again. He clearly hadn't expected this. "What did you just say to me?" Harry asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "I said get out," Seth repeated, louder this time. "This is my show. This is my stage. And I'm not going to stand here and let you insult me and everyone who works here. You need to leave. Now." Harry laughed again, but this time it sounded forced, nervous. "You can't be serious. Do you know who I am?" "I don't care who you are," Seth said, his voice like steel. "You could be the King of England for all I care. You don't get to come into my house and act like this. So yes, I'm serious. Leave." "This is absurd," Harry said, looking around at the audience like they would back him up. But no one did. They just stared at him, some with their mouths open, some shaking their heads. "You're making a huge mistake, Seth. Do you have any idea what kind of backlash you're going to face for this?" "I'll take my chances," Seth said. "Security, can you please escort our guest out?" 2 security guards appeared from the wings. They didn't touch Harry, but they stood close enough to make it clear they meant business. Harry looked at them, then back at Seth, his face a mask of disbelief and rage. "You're going to regret this," Harry said, his voice shaking. "I promise you that." "The only thing I regret is wasting everyone's time tonight," Seth replied. "Goodbye, Harry." Harry stood there for another few seconds, like he was waiting for Seth to back down. But Seth didn't move. He just stood there, arms crossed, waiting. Finally, Harry turned on his heel and started walking toward the exit. The security guards followed close behind. But he wasn't done yet. Halfway to the wings, Harry stopped and turned back around. "You know what your problem is, Seth? You're scared. You're scared of anyone who tells you the truth. You surround yourself with yes men and audience members who laugh at your terrible jokes. And you think that makes you special. But you're not. You're just another late-night hack who'll be forgotten in 5 years." The audience booed. Loud. Really loud. Seth held up his hand to quiet them down. When they settled, he spoke again, his voice calm and measured. "Harry, every single person in this building has shown you nothing but kindness tonight. From the moment you arrived, you've been treated with respect and professionalism, and you've repaid that with contempt and arrogance. So when you stand there and talk about truth, maybe you should look in the mirror and ask yourself why you feel the need to tear other people down. Because from where I'm standing, that says a lot more about you than it does about me or anyone else here." The audience erupted in applause. They stood up, clapping and cheering for Seth. Harry's face went through about 15 different expressions in the span of 3 seconds. Shock, anger, embarrassment. He opened his mouth like he was going to say something else, then closed it again. "Are you finished?" Seth asked. Harry didn't answer. He just turned around again and walked off stage, the security guards right behind him. The second he disappeared into the wings, the audience went absolutely crazy. They cheered louder than they had all night, some of them whistling and shouting Seth's name. Seth stood there for a moment, his chest heaving, his hands still clenched into fists. Then, slowly, He sat back down at his desk, but he ran a hand through his hair and let out a long breath. "Well," he said into the microphone, his voice a little shaky. "That was unexpected." The audience laughed, a release of all the tension that had been building for the past several minutes. Seth smiled, a real smile this time, and shook his head. "I want to apologize to everyone watching at home," he continued. "We had a whole show planned tonight, and obviously that didn't go the way we hoped. But I'm not going to apologize for standing up for myself and for all the people who work on this show. We work too hard to be treated like that." More applause. Someone in the audience shouted, "We love you, Seth," and he laughed, pointing in that direction. "I love you too," he said, "and I want to be clear about something. I have nothing against Prince Harry personally. I don't know what was going on with him tonight. Maybe he was having a bad day. Maybe there's something else going on. But regardless of who you are or what you've been through, there's no excuse for being cruel to people who are just trying to do their jobs." The audience clapped again, quieter this time, but just as supportive. Seth took another breath and looked directly into the camera. "We're going to take a quick break," he said. "When we come back, we'll try to salvage what's left of tonight's show. We've got a great band here, and they're going to play something for you. So don't go anywhere. We'll be right back." The cameras cut away, and the applause sign lit up. The audience gave Seth one more standing ovation as he sat there, processing what had just happened. The band started playing, filling the studio with music, drowning out the whispered conversations happening all around. Backstage, you could hear shouting. Harry's voice carried through the hallways, yelling at someone, probably his publicist or manager. The crew members nearest to the stage entrance exchanged knowing looks. They'd seen difficult guests before, but nothing quite like this. Seth's producer rushed over to him during the commercial break, a headset wrapped around her neck, her face a mixture of concern and excitement. "Are you okay?" she asked. Seth nodded, taking a sip of water from a bottle someone had brought him. Yeah, I'm okay. That was insane though, right? I'm not crazy. That really happened." "That really happened," she confirmed. "And honestly, good for you. He was completely out of line." "I've never kicked anyone off the show before," Seth said, still sounding slightly dazed. "I didn't even know I could do that." "It's your show," she reminded him. "You can do whatever you want. And trust me, the audience is on your side. Listen to them." She was right. Even during the commercial break, the audience was buzzing with energy, talking excitedly about what they'd just witnessed. This was the kind of moment people would talk about for years. The night Seth Meyers kicked a prince off his show. When they came back from commercial, Seth had regained his composure. He did a few more segments, talked with the band, took questions from the audience. He tried to make the rest of the show feel normal, like everything was fine. But there was an electricity in the air that hadn't been there before. Everyone knew they'd just witnessed something historic. Near the end of the show, Seth addressed the incident one more time. "I know a lot of you are probably wondering what's going to happen next," he said. "And honestly, I don't know. But what I do know is this. Respect is a two-way street. I don't care if you're a prince or a president or just a regular person. If you're going to be a guest on this show, you need to treat people with basic human decency. And if you can't do that, then you're not welcome here. It's that simple." The audience applauded one final time. Seth smiled, thanked them for coming, and said goodnight. As the credits rolled and the cameras stopped recording, he finally allowed himself to relax. He loosened his tie, slumped back in his chair, and laughed. A real, genuine laugh that came from somewhere deep in his chest. His head writer came over and clapped him on the shoulder. "That was the most intense thing I've ever seen on this show," he said. "How do you feel?" "Honestly," Seth said, standing up and stretching, "I feel pretty good. I mean, I wish it hadn't happened. I wish we could have had a normal interview. But I'm glad I didn't just sit there and take it. Because that's not fair to me. And it's not fair to everyone else who puts their heart into this show every single night." Around the studio, the crew was already starting to pack up for the night. But everyone was still talking about the interview. It was all anyone could focus on. The camera operators, the sound technicians, the producers, the writers. Everyone had an opinion about what had happened and how Seth had handled it. One of the younger writers approached Seth nervously. "Can I just say," she started, "what you did tonight was really brave. I know it probably doesn't feel like a big deal to you, but it meant a lot to see you stand up like that, especially to someone with that much power and influence." Seth smiled at her. "Thanks. But honestly, it shouldn't be considered brave to expect people to be kind. That should just be the baseline, you know? We shouldn't have to applaud someone for refusing to be treated poorly. But I appreciate you saying that." The makeup artist came over to remove his television makeup, and as she worked, Seth replayed the entire incident in his head. He thought about every word, every facial expression, every moment of tension. He wondered if he could have handled it differently, if he should have tried harder to de-escalate, if kicking Harry off was too extreme. But then he remembered the look on Harry's face when he'd insulted the crew, the dismissive wave of his hand when he'd called Americans unsophisticated, the cruel laugh when he'd mocked Seth's work. And Seth knew he'd made the right call. Some lines shouldn't be crossed, and Harry had crossed all of them. As the studio emptied out and people headed home for the night, Seth sat alone at his desk for a few more minutes. The lights were dimmed now, the audience seats empty. It was just him and the quiet hum of the building settling. He thought about what Harry had said, that he'd be forgotten in 5 years, that he was just another late-night hack. And you know what? Maybe some of that was true. Maybe his show wouldn't last forever. Maybe he wasn't revolutionizing television. But he was doing his best. He was showing up every night, trying to make people laugh, trying to have interesting conversations, trying to create something meaningful. And that had to count for something. Seth stood up, grabbed his jacket, and headed for the door. Tomorrow, the internet would be on fire. The clip would go viral. People would take sides. Some would defend Harry. Some would defend him. There would be think pieces and hot takes and probably 1,000 memes. But tonight, Seth had done what he thought was right. He'd stood up for himself and his team. He'd drawn a line and refused to let someone cross it, regardless of their title or status. And as he walked out of the studio and into the cool night air, he felt something he hadn't expected to feel after such a chaotic evening. He felt proud.